All right, welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest headaches in any large-scale project, managing all that complexity. I mean, when you've got dozens of contractors, clients, and suppliers all trying to work together, how in the world do you keep them all synced up? Well, the secret, it turns out, is all about managing the gaps between them.
So let's just pause on that for a second. What do you think is the biggest hidden risk? Is it the budget? The schedule? Maybe the technology? Yeah, all of those are huge, for sure. But the real hidden killer, the one that can quietly torpedo a whole project, is often lurking in the gaps, the miscommunications and misalignments between all those moving parts.
And that, right there, is the core of the issue. See, as a project gets bigger, the communication network just explodes in complexity. Just picture this. The foundation team pours their concrete, but it's just 1 inch too high. Why? Because their plans weren't perfectly synced up with the final specs from the steel fabricator. That tiny little gap in information, it can lead to months of delays and cost millions in rework. Every single time you add a new team, you're not just adding one more piece to the puzzle, you're adding dozens of new places where things can go wrong.
So, when you don't actively manage those connections, what happens? You get the stuff nightmares are made of, right? Scope that just keeps creeping up, schedules that get blown out of the water because of a communication breakdown, and costs that spiral out of control because nobody was clear on who was responsible for what. It's like this massive, expensive domino effect, and it all starts with just a little bit of poor coordination.
Okay, so how do we stop this from happening? How do we prevent all that chaos? Well, you don't just cross your fingers and hope for the best. You need a system, a real methodology designed specifically to tackle this exact problem. And that solution has a name, Interface Management, or IM for short.
Now, before we go any further, we got to get on the same page about what we mean by an interface. See, an interface isn't just a physical thing, like where two pipes connect. It's any point where work or information gets handed off. It's that moment when the structural design file is sent to the steel fabricator. It's the data that the client shares with a supplier. Every single one of those handoffs is a potential landmine if it's not managed properly.
So, that brings us to interface management itself. What is it? It's basically the process of systematically finding, defining, and then managing all of those connection points. Think of it like creating a common playbook for the entire project. You're standardizing the processes, the tools, everything, so that every single team knows exactly what their job is and, just as importantly, how their piece of the puzzle fits in with everyone else's.
Now, you're probably thinking, this sounds great, but where do we even start? And the good news is, we don't have to start from scratch here. We're not reinventing the wheel. The Construction Industry Institute, you'll hear them called CII, has already created a really solid framework to walk us through it.
It's called the IM Maturity Model, and honestly, its goal is pretty straightforward. It's designed to give project pros like you a structured way to figure out, first, where your project is right now, and then how to implement just the right amount of interface management to get you where you need to be. And the process itself? It's really just common sense, and it's super flexible. First, you assess your current state. You take a hard look at where the risks are hiding right now. Then, you figure out your desired state. What level of control does this specific project actually need? And finally, you customize the pace. You roll out these changes in a way that makes sense for your team and the project's unique demands. Okay, so a framework is great, but how do you actually use it? To make this whole thing actionable, CII gives us 2 key tools. I like to think of them as your strategic map and your tactical compass for navigating all this complexity. They're called PIRI and ICAT. All right, first up is PIRI. That stands for Project Interface Risk Impact Matrix. This is your 30,000-foot view, the big picture tool. It helps you answer that huge, crucial question. Okay, based on how complex this project is and what's at stake for the business, how much interface management do we really need to be doing?
And then you've got ICAT, which is the Interface Complexity Assessment Tool. So if PIRI answers the how much question, ICAT is all about the where. This is your boots on the ground tool. It lets you get into the nitty-gritty and figure out which specific interfaces, between which exact teams, are the most complicated and carry the biggest risks.
So you can see how they work together, right? It's not one or the other. PIRI is the high-level, strategic piece. It helps the whole organization decide on the overall approach by asking, how much IM do we need? Then ICAT is tactical. It helps the actual project team deal with the day-to-day work by asking, okay, which specific interfaces do we need to watch like a hawk? You really need both for a solid strategy. So let's pull this all together. When you combine the methodology, this framework, and these tools, what's the big payoff? It's really about a fundamental shift in how you run a project. It's about moving from total chaos to having real, tangible control.
And there's this quote from the CII's research that just hits the nail on the head. By putting interface management in place early on, you're not just sitting around waiting for fires to start. You're proactively finding where those problems are most likely to pop up, and you're putting them out before they can do any real damage to the project.
And this is the most important thing to take away from all of this. Interface management is what separates a project firefighter, someone who's always running around reacting to the latest crisis, from a project architect, someone who designs a system where that one-inch concrete mistake is caught way back in the planning phase, long before any concrete gets ordered. It's about playing offense instead of constant defense.
And that really leaves us with one final, pretty important question you should ask yourself. Take a good, honest look at the projects you're working on right now. Are you controlling those countless connection points? Or are they, those hidden, unmanaged gaps, quietly controlling you and the fate of your project?